Okay, so, yeah, Dave, go ahead.
One thing that when I talk about the EA group, I was missing a slide, and I just want to give a shout out to Siemens because they're providing us with one of their software tools pro bono, and we use that for requires management and for use cases, and we'll probably expand use of that with the certification working group. So I just want to give a shout out to them. I should have had a slide up there for that. So thank you.
We got a question back here.
It's probably for Paul. At the interoperability workshop, I was trying to figure out what kind of information was exchanged in that interoperability.
I had a couple of slides detailing that got cut from the presentation, but
Wah.
we
Tell Don to just say everything you need to do. He's stifling your.
No,
What-
no, Bill, that's good.
it's a good question. What we had was we tested both actual I/O. So Exxon people brought some I/O boxes that we had people connect to, so some real physical I/O. Then we actually had a standard OPCUA information model testing. So we ran through all the data changes that people could have. We had the MTF redfish exchange of data that we ran through. And then we also had a GDS there for some global discovery services to see if people can actually set up certificate handling and some of the security pieces. So it was a pretty good range of tests, and our next one will expand a lot. No more questions? There's a hand.
Hey, good morning, Brian Clemens Dow. Thinking about how this is going to roll out and preparing, future enabling or OPA enabling my installation. And I hear a lot of talk of gateways and intermediate steps, things that'll help us get there and be prepared. Is that a portion of some of the work the Standards Committee is working on, an OPA gateway? How do we make this transition, particularly in brownfield installations when we?
Yeah, let's let Alex do one of the three profiles for the physical platform, the DCN is a gateway. I'll let Alex
Yeah,
elaborate.
so like Don just said, we specified 3 hardware platforms that people can build on. One of those is a gateway. It's intended basically that since we're using OPCUA as our language for everybody to talk, that all of the DCS vendors that exist today are building OPCUA servers and clients. And so those gateways should be a natural extension of what their current plans are. And we plan on having gateways on our side for other things besides OPCUA if that's necessary. But it's a two-pronged thing. We expect people to start moving to OPCUA for their current DCSs and make data available that way. And if they choose not to, or they want a higher performance perhaps, then they can build a gateway that meets our requirements for those. Does that help? Of course, the real thing you can do to help prepare is when you send out RFQs, ask the vendors what their plans for OPAF support are.
Other one over here.
Yeah, good morning, Bob Whitaker with Shell. I have a question. As you talk about the expectation for wrapping up OPAF version 3.0, second half of 21, can you talk about the current thinking on the sustainability of this effort after that? What does the future look like?
Yeah, good question, Bob. I mean, the Open Group basically, as a standards facilitation organization, has been in existence for about 30 years. So they're an abiding organization. I think we're going to get into a continuous improvement cycle. The fact that we're leveraging standards of, we're a standard of standards, so the underlying standards give a pretty solid base. I mean, the real clear, the one extremely obvious area of white space is the physical platform standard. The size, weight, power, connectors, backplane types of things pertaining to that distributed control node where there are no standard. Well, there's lots of standards, but that's one that's really kind of unique to us. The other area where I think it probably represents some new territory. I'm thinking ahead here. We're depending a lot on the role of the systems integrator in this ecosystem, and I think that's probably another area where we can learn by doing, but then institutionalize through standards on how to do the systems integration work. I suspect that's something that will be kind of prominent in version 4, Bob. So that's just thinking a couple of steps ahead. I don't know, you guys want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. So one of the steps we made was the whole certification work was part of the business working group, and we saw that going forward, certification is always going to be there. So it requires a separate group, some really focused efforts there. So we took that portion out of the business working group to make sure we're building ourselves for sustainment over time.
This maybe dovetails a little bit with that, but compliance and certification, you have multiple standards here, and you're weaving some things together there. That's usually critical to success of movements like this. How are you going to kind of tackle that?
If I understood the question correctly, hi, it's Ron Bro from Wind River. There are multiple standards in play. How do we handle that? Generally speaking, what we would be doing is approaching each of those individual standards bodies and working with them to identify a regime for them to execute the certification on our behalf or the testing on our behalf. And then within the open group, we would effectively verify that and offer up certification. So there'll be a format to go through each of these organizations, establish liaisons, and put in place those formalities to make the certification occur. It'll be a somewhat detailed process, and that'll be part of the operational work that we've got in the year ahead.
Yeah, since it's a hybrid, knitting that all together, but to getting down to hard compliance certification, that is going to be an interesting task, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And what would be it would almost seem you have these organizations, you'll need some type of structure organization that's the focal point for all of that. So you don't have standards organizations
No, that's
forming a
Bill,
circle
we're
and pointing
crystal
right
clear
when
on
there's
that.
a problem.
You got Susan, Ed, you guys want to go into that?
Yeah, with respect to the open group, Susan is in a good place to talk to that.
Hi, I'm a certification manager for the Open Group, and we've done this on many platforms, many other standards. We'd like to do standards of standards. We have processes in place that we, like what Ron was saying, we meet with the other standards bodies. If they can't perform the certification themselves, then we work on a way that the Open Group becomes the certification authority. It's not to say that for some of these standards that we have out here, we're not certifying their standard. We're certifying OPAF standard because we're cherry picking the best of the different standards. So that's how we're doing that process, and something that we've done for 30 years. And we're the abiding governing entity that will do that.
So I'm chairman or director of the certification program for the foundation. We're working very actively with them to make sure that the foundation OPCUA portions of it fit in very easily, and that we have just a single certification that passes through everything. So a big portion of this is OPCUA related. So we're actively involved.
Just to try to complete. So we recognize the complexity and the importance. So I think what I would like to add to what everybody has said before, this is a formal process. There is a policy in place, and the more important aspect of this in turning this from paper to an operational aspect is work together in identifying the different specific elements, have a procedure in place to validate the, let's say, the suitable verification entities, the test labs, like the OPC Foundation, in specific areas of the standard that can confirm that a given product fulfills the requirement that has been defined in the OPAS specification. And then obviously working with the Open Group as a certification authority for this effort in documenting and those, let's say, the confirmation of conformance in those areas. So it's a, it's complex, yes. It's a lot of work, probably, but we have kind of a roadmap on how to make it happen and how to make it successful for the whole ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
I'll get it.
Scott Moyer with Dow Chemical. In looking at the application model, type F application, which would be, very, very basic regulatory control.
No,
No, that is not the case?
Hang on a second. Any type of software application.
Okay.
Okay. Model predictive control, your optimizers.
Okay.
Anything.
It
It's the
includes
whole
a lot of
space,
things,
The whole
all right?
space of applications.
The concept of being able to bring that information in that could be shared. Well, the example was, maybe changing an extension to make something that can operate across multiple devices. Are you looking, is the vision to also have a non-proprietary common editing tool so that if you're doing ladder or if you're doing function block or if you're doing SFC, you could pull it into either a Windows operating system or iOS, do the editing, and then download it? And if so, I applaud you.
Yeah. So in the statements of requirements, okay, then I'm going to throw it to Dennis and maybe to Dave Emerson. But in the statement of requirements, is we want to have minimum, ideally single engineering interface, which is why automation ML, the import export guys. You want to on Dave or Dennis, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I just stole my thunder. Okay. The whole concept of the portable configuration is that you can configure your control strategies and even other higher level type of applications using a common language. And again, we're using 1131-3. So if you take a look at that, it's got structured text, which is a higher level language in addition to the function blocks and the others. You look at 1499, it's a way to organize those. So the concept here is that we're not specifying what vendors could build, but we are giving the capability for a vendor to write a application editor tool that does all the configuration of all the PADIM signals, of all the DCNs, so you can identify the DCNs, how they relate to the projects, et cetera. Somebody could do that and could import and export that. So there's the possibility for that creating, but we're not going to define it ourselves. It's up to the software companies and the current vendors that are in there to decide whether or not they want to do that. In fact, that's an area where we think there can be significant competition to lower the man hours required to do the work. And if we were to try to specify that, it would take forever and wouldn't bring value. Specifying the interface package that Dennis is talking about so everybody can produce the same thing, that's a winner.
So thanks for your question. This is actually one of those
right here.
areas. Yeah, I want to tap into this discussion just a little bit. This is one of those areas we need to reach out and make that clear to everyone, because this is clearly something everyone has in the back of the mind. How's this going to work? And reading the standard, if you're not a specialist, might not get that all. But these are things we want to reach out to communities to bring this to the table.
Yes, sir.
My name is Tim Shepardson with Prime Controls, and you presented earlier that you have several function blocks that you've defined. My question is, how far are you going to take that? Are you going to create standardize a full-featured function block library? Are you going to depend on vendors to create that? And then if vendors are creating that, will vendor A's function block library work on vendor B's hardware? Kind of an extension of the last question.
Okay, the proposal that we're working with defines 18 basic function blocks, and I don't even know if we'll get to 18, to tell you the truth. But the answer to your second question is absolutely yes. I mean, the whole concept of application portability is this software will work on other hardware, vendors' platforms and who are not the providers of those function blocks. That's the fundamental concept. Okay, and again, it's the interoperability. So as I said in the 6.4 discussion, what we envision is a software ecosystem where the asset owner can assemble applications of software components sourced from a multiplicity of suppliers. As long as that software conforms to the OPAF standards, that's a way to achieve interoperability, these basic principles of this venture. Yes, sir.
I think we've got time for one last question. Oh, that's all right. Sorry.
My name is Nobuki Ogura from Hitachi, Japan. My question is, does this OPA system support the redundancy? For instance, like a redundant DCN?
Yeah, there are pieces in there that allow a vendor to build redundancy. So one of these is the global discovery service and namespace service that is in the OPC UA, so that if a tag, for example, is coming into one DCN, but you have alternate places it can go into, then the software can detect it and move back. So we're building the functionality in for redundancy, but again, it's going to be up to the vendors to decide if they want to provide that or not.
Additionally, if you go in and look at the preliminary spec for version 2, you'll see we talk about control network redundancy and how that might be implemented. So rings, dual rings, trees, redundant trees. So those are techniques that are available to be used and that we've identified as profiles. The actual interchange between a hot and backup controller, we haven't tackled that one yet. We're still trying to deal with the connector between the field instrument and the electronics, right? As we move up the stack, we will eventually come to some point where we say, if it's still an issue and we still want to address it, that the hardware, we could specify an interchange between the two modules on how to implement redundancy. But we're working our way upwards, and that is a hardware thing. But on the control network side, we got you covered.
Okay, let's wrap it here. Finally, Harry Forbes, Andy Chatha, thanks for giving us this opportunity. We really appreciate it, okay? Thanks.
Thank you.